Good evening, all. Great to see you all here again. These speaker nights are going great success. We're on our 12th week now of these events. I'll say a few more words later, but I'll now introduce you to a guy that was born in my own town, Ashby de la Zouch. He's a spy, all sorts of things. He's been in all sorts of scrapes. He's escaped me for 44 years because I never saw him. Anyway, so I'll introduce you to Tim Bradshaw, who will give you a very interesting talk, and we'll have some questions and answers after. Tim, it's all yours, mate.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Right, let me just 1 second, team. What I'm going to try and do is I've got a few bits and pieces to share with you for you to have a look at. So, just so I can check now, can everybody see a picture of a bloke with a gun and it says "Building Resilience" on the outside of it? By all means, use the chat box, yes, or just a few of you tell me you've got it, and I know we're I know we're up and running.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, guys, welcome. Really, really nice to see you all. What an amazing turnout! It's fantastic to see. But then, I suppose, you know, being bluntly honest, we don't really have anywhere else to be at the moment, do we? Particularly those of us in Scotland, because we're still not allowed out, but we're fighting for it. So. What I want to talk to you about tonight, and I've a few emails with Mark and Marcus, really, is I don't believe in just reciting a curriculum vitae, because as I look across here, I'm sure many of you guys have got a great story to tell. So actually, I'd like to put a bit of a theme on it, and perhaps maybe take a few or share with a few of the lessons I've earned on occasion the hard way over my career. The technical expression for what I used to do for a living is a covert human intelligence officer, which is a very long-winded way of saying that I used to run, recruit, operate foreign agents. And I should always start these things by pointing out that Jason Bourne, and I'm sure many of you have seen those movies, is fundamentally the worst spy in the world. And that's on the basis that, I mean, A, he's American, but secondly, every time he steps out of his front door, somebody shoots at him. So he's kind of missed the point. And there wouldn't be many of us left if that was the case for real. So in actual fact, although we did spend an awful lot of time practicing the skills you would imagine, driving, shooting, fighting, etc., I was never issued an Aston Martin, sadly. I'm occasionally lent one by Aston Martin in Edinburgh for after dinner speaking, but that's about as far as it goes. In actual fact, the essence of what we would do for a living was around building relationships, building resilience, and influencing other people. So although me included, we like to put up the kind of sexy pictures with the cool guns and all the kit, in actual fact, it was about people, and it was about understanding people. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And actually, some of the human stories that I came across, not my own, but other people's human stories, are the ones that are probably even more important. My first tour as an agent in Afghanistan, as an example, I lived with the National Directorate of Security for a period of 3 months. So me on my own, dressed like a local, living with 10 guys. Now, the National Directorate of Security is the Afghan secret police. And just in case any of you happened to be work in the legal sector or law firms, then we would describe them as robust, which is pretty one way of looking at it. So Wali Mohammed was the guy I lived with for about 3 months. He was previously trained by the KGB. The KGB became the FSB. They're the people that like to go on holiday to Salisbury and have a tendency to leave their radioactive litter about the place. But that's a different story altogether, frankly. So on completion of 2 or 3 operational tours of duty in Afghanistan and Libya and amongst other places, what I actually did is I also then started to realise that a number of my colleagues were struggling sometimes with not necessarily mental health, but just some of the relationships they'd had to build and where they go. So we decided that one of the biggest problems with kind of big brave men as a rule is that they don't actually like to ask for help very much, because I guess they've been kind of all through our training, they've been kind of suckered into not wanting help and to trying to be kind of tough and big and strong. So we decided that what we were going to do was take on a little bit of a challenge, and we were going to find somewhere high and stand on a high point. And what we would do is we would shout from that high point that it was okay to ask for help, and that actually if you were struggling a bit or you were having a bad day, then that's okay. And you know what? I suspect over the last 10 or 11 weeks, there's probably quite a lot of people that can equate to that. So actually what we decided we would do, we decided to go to Mount Everest. Because if you're going to stand somewhere high and shout from it's okay to ask for help, then the summit of Mount Everest is probably as good a place to do it as any, really. Sadly, that was in 2015, which is when all the major earthquakes hit the region. And I don't know if any of you are into mountaineering or sort of Everest as a bit of a hobby, possibly, but it wasn't good. Let me just show you a little video clip. Hopefully you'll get the sound. Are you getting the sound on that one, guys, or not?
Not yet, no.
Not yet.
No.
Not yet, no.
Okay, bear me 1 second. I can fix that from here.
It's a real experience here. So we're actually across the other side of the mountain on the Tibetan campsite. And we're surrounded on every side. Well, I'm at 5,200 meters. So you have to forgive me for croaking your voice and slight breathlessness. Because you can imagine that the mountains where I stand tower above me up to 6,000 or 7,000 meters. And they're all rock scree slopes. And the first thing that started to happen was literally the tent started to rock and to move around us. And almost like thunder, huge boulders started to break away around us from the sides of the mountains and roll down to the bottom of the base camp. Everybody here was absolutely fine because the local Sherpas know exactly what they're doing, and they've positioned all our tents and equipment to protect us from just such a thing happening. But as I said, we're in fact the other side of the mountain from Nepal and the Tibetan side, so quite a way away from the epicenter. And yet still, it was quite significant. The guys here have done an amazing job of looking after each other, and of course there's some anxiety now amongst Sherpas, the majority of whom are Nepalese, trying to phone home using various sort of satellite communication systems to check that their sort of homes and families and everything are okay. So yeah, it was certainly very dramatic. What felt like half an hour, but I think it was probably more like 10 seconds this morning.
So that was me, believe it or not, using a mobile phone talking to Sky News live. And shortly after that was taken, we had a pretty scary moment. They reckon somewhere in the region of 5 million tons of snow and ice came down the side of the mountain at us. And the fog had set in, so the fog was probably 100 meters above us or so. And we could hear this coming down the side of the mountain. And then out of the fog or the mist, if you like, with these rocks would appear. And I would be like some sort of crazy goalkeeper trying to jump out of the way. The major problem was that these rocks were actually the size of cars. So that was pretty challenging. So that was another pretty rough day at the office. But the theme here is that despite amongst all of this tragedy, what I saw was people continuing to step on. And I thought, crikey, this is really interesting. And in the same way that when we went through our selection process, and I'm sure there's a few veterans amongst you, but you would hear the story, you know, and we'd be up on the mountains, and I'll never forget, I was referred to as Blue 5 for 12 weeks. So let's let nobody tell you it's not humane, it's charming. And I remember carrying a rucksack which felt like it was probably the same size of me. And I remember coming, and I remember getting top of one of the mountains one day and saying, that's it, staff, I've had enough, I need to go, I'm done. This is obviously, you know, not for me. And that instructor looked at me and he said, Blue 5, he said, you're not very clever, are you? I said, oh, brilliant, thanks very much, staff. So not only am I inside out and exhausted, but now I'm being insulted as well. He said, well, you're at the top of the mountain, Blue 5. You know, he said, so now what you do, you've got to walk down again. no matter what happens. And I was like, so he said, you may as well quit at the next checkpoint because that's at the bottom anyway. You've got to walk there anyway. And I went, yeah, okay, you make a fair point. And I actually spent the next 12 weeks quitting at the next checkpoint. But in fact, that was where, for me, one of the first mottos that we took out of this, and I think over the last 10 weeks, this has become really prevalent. And the first concept I want to share with you this evening is this concept of only ever deal with intelligence, not information. Yeah, there was me on top of the mountain, had enough, tired, exhausted. And what I didn't do was look at the intelligence. And the intelligence was I had to walk down anyway. What was really happening to me, work that out. And I think for me, one of the things that possibly the media are guilty of over the last however long it's been is bombarding us with information. So the first sort of line I used, the hard way, if you like, on selection for special duties, was this concept of only ever deal with intelligence, not information, and carry that through wherever you go. And then the second lesson I got was that life is actually a mental test, not a physical test, even though occasionally it does start to appear like a physical test. I remember coming off the mountains, walking into the Waterfalls car park at the bottom of the Brecon Beacons, pretty tired, been on my feet for 20 hours. And I remember seeing the big trucks parked up there and thinking, thank goodness for this. This is me, get on the back of the truck and we're away. And of course, in time-honoured tradition, what happens is the trucks drive away. So of course, morale soars at this point and you think, great, this will be fun. And of course, those of us possibly of less intellect simply turned back towards Hereford and started to walk. And sure enough, 200 metres around the corner, there were the trucks waiting for us. And the test that this was giving us was really, it was about an intellect test. It was, do you have the mental wherewithal, if you like, just to keep going? And again, filter out this intelligence from this information and just keep stepping, I guess, is what we tried to do. Let me show you another video. You might like this video as well. So have a look at this for a minute, because this is the next concept that I'd like to share with you. I've been in some pretty scary situations. And here's another one. Have a quick look at this one.
I think it's broken that. Yeah.
How much is that? 358, I reckon. So that should keep Mark happy. He said he wanted 4 hours.
Yeah. Keep looking at the feet.
You're fucking right, I am. The nav is easy, there's no more up.
Mark!
Well done, Paul.
Go on, hands in the air.
I guess, and here's, if anyone's interested, anyone been to Switzerland or Zermatt? That's the Matterhorn. So that is the summit of the Matterhorn there. I must apologise. You may have heard a slightly blasphemous word there. I'd forgotten that was there. And that's because had you stumbled at that point, it is a 4,400 metre fall straight down to Zermatt. And Mark, the guy in the blue jacket in front of me, had said to me, just watch your footing here, Tim, and other good advice. Anyway, there we go. But here's this concept. We're actually merely walking along a footpath. Okay, it's a footpath that's 4,500 metres in the air. But I like this concept of fear, is false expectation appearing real. And it comes back to this intelligent things. What's really happening to me? What's for real? Actually, on that mountaintop, we're walking along. We're not on ice axes. We're not tied to anything. We don't need to be. And again, there's an awful lot of anxiety, I think, in many situations created by what we call catastrophic thinking. And there's this spiral, and it's really easy to concentrate on what could happen, what might happen, what should happen in the future, all of things that haven't actually happened yet. And this concept is something that carried me through a number of operations. When operating in Afghanistan, you are permanently on edge, permanently full of adrenaline, permanently nervous, and actually at the same time having to build, in my case, build relationships, with some fairly dangerous people. So on a number of occasions, I would just have to say to myself, okay, what is false expectation and what is real? What is the intelligence, not the information? What is actually happening to me? And what can I do to control this all around me? And the other thing that I realised very quickly on was that actually, contrary to popular belief, you need to relieve pressure, not add pressure, to increase performance for an individual. And I think we've created a society where at the moment we perhaps need to try and look after each other just a little bit more. I think it's absolutely fabulous to see all of you sitting here on this screen, everybody just taking a minute to spend some time with each other. And regularly, where I come from with my background, people are surprised. People think that, yeah, run them harder, carry more weight, run them faster. It's not actually true. We must, it's really important that we relieve pressure and look after each other in order to increase performance. When my team, we got involved in a major gunfight in the middle of nowhere, and my team at that point is nervous, they're scared, the adrenaline is driving, they want to get home. You naturally, the fight or flight mechanism triggers, and you naturally become selfish. It's a completely normal thing to happen. And as a leader at that moment, what I've got to do is I've got to, best I can, relieve that pressure on the individual. I've got to give them some reassurance and give them some direction so that we got an opportunity to move in. Believe it or not, and you don't have to give me a show of hands, there's no requirement to do so, but let me explain to you the psychology of bulk buying toilet rolls. So human nature is such that when we lose control, we fight to get control back again. And often we look for small things that will give us that sense of direction and control. And it can be something as simple as bulk buying milk or toilet rolls in this situation. In some of the situations that I've been in, where I've got soldiers desperate, if you can actually give them a constructive direction to move in, then all that happens is the team starts to unite, the team starts to pull together, and we start to move away in this much more positive direction. My job, the most challenging aspects of my job, without question, was to try to build relationships with people. Now, I'm going to let you into a secret. There's nothing covert of what I'm talking to you about, but it's neither is it pub chat, gentlemen. So one of the problems is that if you need intelligence from really bad people, you have to make friends with quite bad people by definition. And that was my job. So on occasion, I was required to build quite strong relationships with people that I really wouldn't want to sit and have a cup of tea, let alone a beer with. And trying to hold dear, I guess, that concept, that realization that the greater good was more important, was often one of the most challenging aspects of our job. Trying to understand that this particular individual sitting in front of me that actually occasionally does bad things, and I have to allow that to happen in order to get wider intelligence, is probably one of the most challenging aspects. But what it also shows you is that you can create influence almost anywhere and with almost anybody. My example earlier of Wali Mohammed, who I used to live with, you know, we didn't even speak the same language together, and yet we were able to build quite a serious bond. When I finished serving overseas, and what was really interesting is we started to move into the corporate world, and I just assumed that corporates pretty much always kind of listen to people, build relationships and create resilience, and it turns out they don't, and it turns out they're really not very good at it. So we started to take some of the human intelligence skills and start to share them amongst the corporate world. And what we also found was, in my opinion, over the last probably 5 to 10 years, we're guilty as a nation of managing, not leading, which is something I'm really happy to talk to you about. I find that quite interesting. We now lead people with KPIs and spreadsheets rather than motivation, understanding and conversation, which is something that I've just found quite interesting. My favourite example of how it's important to listen. Tell me, Who has had a conversation with a friend that went something like this? Oh, Mark, I see you've just been on holiday. Yes, Tim, yeah, just been on holiday. Mark, where'd you go? Oh, I've just been to Switzerland. Oh, me too. Absolutely love Switzerland. Yeah, who's guilty of having a conversation something like that? Obviously, it doesn't have to be Switzerland. Yeah, absolutely. A few hands going up there. So here's the first trick to becoming a spy, okay? What you've just done is you've just hijacked the conversation. So what you've done is you've made the conversation about you, not them. So now suddenly we're talking about my experience of Switzerland, not Mark's. People are not in control of what they're saying. So we need to get other people talking, and that's how we find out about other people. And we do that by spinning the wheel and listening for dropout intelligence. So you can actually simply repeat back conversations. I've worked with people that have subsequently been prosecuted for giving up intelligence that didn't even know they'd done it. But probably the most famous incident for me is at 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting with somebody who was very, very senior in Gaddafi's regime. And I'm sitting there talking to this guy, and he said to me at some point, he didn't drink because of his faith, over a coffee, Tim, I guess at some point you'll want to know about the plane. Yeah. And of course, in my head, I picked up on this word straight away and did some research. And any of you certainly from Scotland will know what plane I'm talking about. And in fact, he was talking about Lockerbie. And some 15 years later, through the dropout intelligence, through listening to a conversation effectively, we were able to unpick that and set up a series of networks and interviews that led to the prosecution and subsequent shipping abroad of Megrahi, who's the guy that you'll probably all remember, got sent back to Libya to be dealt with. But again, all of that came about from this developing this sort of set of skills where you can actually listen and take on board what other people are saying. So I guess what I'm really trying to say to you is that the sexy skills are all well and good, but the human skills of listening, paying attention, and developing relationships is actually what it's all about. Subsequently to that, I've got a project that's coming next, because what do we do next? I'm now quite a big advocate for mental health. So we run a few challenges, and I think I'm gonna invite you guys to join me on my next journey and my next adventure. But we might talk about that perhaps afterwards. I think we should probably take some questions and bits and pieces from people, and then perhaps Mark, if you're happy at the end, I'll talk about the next journey. And I understand you have a motorcycle sort of members within the club, so perhaps we can invite you of them to join us. Guys, that's a sort of outline of where I've been and what I've been at. My suggestion now is that I think this would be much better if we make this live, and I'm happy to answer. There's all sorts of really interesting questions there. So rather than me waffle on, I get very nervous at that height, Simon. Mark, do you want to pick some of these questions, or do you want me to sort of?
Yeah, you can you see the questions as well in the chat?
Yeah, somebody appears to be calling me Jesus Christ.
Yes, that's true. I have got some. What we'll do, we'll have to go through them separately, because some people are sending me the message privately, which is all awesome. So if you pick a couple off, then maybe I'll ask someone. We'll make it slightly more interactive. But yeah.
So somebody's put here, how does SIS, which is obviously MI6 for those of you that are not into that, compare with the CIA, Mossad, KGB, and other agencies? Well, clearly the best. The least funded and with the biggest handcuffs. One of the things you'll find when you work internationally, and I have to say, much as I don't like giving credit to the Americans have a slightly different attitude to life. And when they put in operational teams, they're aware of what that operational team does, and they give them political freedom to move. So in other words, the decision is taken before they put a team in. Does that make sense, guys? So we will deploy much quicker, but we're then expected to kind of make up our own rules of engagement, if you like, as that goes along. Whereas the Americans decide, if we're going to send a team, then send a team. I have worked with Mossad, and they are probably the most effective organisation that I've ever worked with, and you can read into that whatever you so choose. If you want to sum up Mossad, does anybody remember the 6 members of Hamas that were killed by Mossad in Dubai using British passports dressed as tennis players? And I've seen an interview with the colonel, who's the head of operations for Mossad, and the press kind of tried to grill him, and they said, Colonel Rahim, we understand that you put a team in and you executed 6 members of the organisation, and he went, yes, I did. And that was the end of that interview. If you can only imagine the waffling that would have taken place had that been Dominic Raab, who knows? What's the most realistic spy TV drama that you've ever seen, and why? So, unfortunately, the ones that are good to watch are not all that realistic. As I've hinted about before, it's very much about the people and the relationships, and that actually takes really sort of a really long time to get your head around. So, and the other thing is that the team, does anybody remember the TV series Spooks? I think Adam was the kind of lead character, yeah. So the storylines are scarily more close to reality than you might think. But the reality is that would be 100 people. So in actual fact, people are very specialist. So there are specialist surveillance guys. There are specialist agent handlers, which is what we would do. So every kind of single one of those aspects, some of the brightest people by far and away are the analysts. You know, they're the people that join the dots. We're often really referred to just as a collection asset. You know, we go meet the people. How many people have I killed as part of my, that's a fairly punchy question. I think it would be inappropriate for me to give you that number, to be completely honest with you. But what I will say to you is that whilst I was deployed in Afghanistan, I was not engaged with combat with the Taliban. And some of my friends were guards officers, and I am at the utmost respect for them, because they would be out every single day. And some of these lads are 18, 19 years of age. And they were stepping on IEDs, and they were getting shot at on a daily basis. In fact, one young lad that I happened to be around when it kicked off, his brother was killed on the Wednesday and was due to go on patrol on the Thursday, and the other brother stepped up the following day to take the patrol because he knew that his brother wouldn't want him to let down his friends. And that's pretty emotional. When I was there, I was actually involved with hunting what we call high value targets. So there is a list which you may have seen in the press called the JPEL list. And that list, they are people that have been internationally recognized as a problem. So Al-Qaeda, if you like, rather than the Taliban. And our job was very much to engage with global terrorism rather than the local fighting in Afghanistan. But it's all very interlinked. And what was quite interesting, for us was very much about finance. So if you can stop the money, you would be amazed how much of the rest of it then can't function. So quite a lot of what we were involved with was to do with what we call threat finance, i.e. stopping the money. And that's fascinating and actually requires much more clever than people. Am I furloughed? No. I run my own business now. So we run a training company, Sandstone Communications, and we deliver leadership training, and we deliver business development training, negotiation training, etc., all over the world, actually. I've been talking to the Middle East this morning. We do all the leadership training for Mercedes-Benz across the Middle East. So no, not furloughed. In fact, quite the opposite. My team have been quite an inspiration, been amazing, actually, in trying to keep our business going, as I'm sure some of you have. Over the last 3 months. I often joke, my sort of natural reaction is not to dig a trench, but to stick another magazine on and come out fighting. And I'm afraid I don't really know what else to do. So that's what we've tried to do over the last 3 months. I
have a couple of private questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Awesome.
Somebody's got human there, somebody's right into it, yeah.
That's all right. I'm just trying to get the sounding so that I can keep up, because I'm trying to follow you answering the questions, and I'll know I'll lose my place. So this is from Chris Carrow. He's saying, could I ask you how you found the selection course at Hereford? Had it been built up by others around you, and the actual course, although hard, was not as daunting as expected? This particular person served in the Royal Marines as an officer for 7 years, and the SBS training was at the time run at Poole.
Ah, very good.
Yeah.
So I'm always told, and I'm told Poole is exactly the same, that the biggest dropout rate is the day before it starts, which is actually people talking themselves out of it. Our course, the course I did is slightly different. It does overlap in so much because we have a whole lot of specialist human intelligence stuff. And actually what we found was that the physical side of it, it sounds ridiculous, but actually was a break. Still pretty horrendous, very different to what the SAS guys would do, but that's not really our job remit. But for us, the most challenging thing was we would have to plan very complex operations, and then we would have to run very complex negotiations and interviews, but having done maybe 8 or 9 hours of physicality first, absolutely chin-strapped and exhausted, and then have to try and do kind of intellectual type operations. And actually for us, that was by far and away the most difficult bit. And the course that we go through, which is called a DRC, actually the most frightening thing, if you like, is you never know what's happening from 1 minute to the next. So you won't find out what's happening laid out. The run times, all that sort of stuff, you can find out obviously through friends, but it's that feeling of trepidation of not knowing what was coming next. Actually, for me, that was probably the most daunting. It's just a very different experience. Certainly the guys at Poole and the guys at Hereford, whilst there's an element of that, they do know what's coming next and therefore can prepare for that. If Jim, did you say? If Jim was an officer, he'd have done Officers Week, and that's a slightly different thing again.
Very good, thank you. And then the other one that was just from John Butler, JB. He says, outside of the military, where can this robust management style be learned by aspirant young people?
Do you know, one of the things we're really, really passionate about, and we sponsor a few young athletes, all sorts of stuff, is I think there's a huge disconnect at the moment. And I know the world moves on, but if you were to ask my father who his role models or sporting heroes were, you'd probably have got JPR Williams, who's a rugby player, but also a surgeon. But you'd have got people like Donald Campbell or George Mallory, and there were people that were doing something. So I don't doubt for a second that there is a place for I don't know, online kind of heroes, if you like. But actually, I think we all have a role to play in just getting young people outdoors. And I think that's the first step. And the first step is to say yes and to go and have a go. And in the last couple of years, we've taken 150 lawyers to do their first triathlon, and we've taken 80 lawyers up and down the Three Peaks Challenge. But what I'm going to ask you to do is just say yes once. So I guarantee most of the people on this chat here, at some point on a Friday night, obviously current circumstances aside, you've all sat around the table, perhaps having a beer or a glass of wine or something, and somebody said, right, let's go and walk up a hill tomorrow, or let's go and do this famous walk locally tomorrow. And everyone goes, yeah, I'm up for that, let's do that. And then what happens is Saturday morning, I've got to pick the kids up, I'm doing my hair, or whatever, and we find a reason not to do that. And if you just say yes, just once, what happens is you go out for that walk and you enjoy that walk and it goes really well. And then the next time, the following week, what happens is you'll now go out for dinner with the people that also went on that walk. And now you're all sitting around the table and somebody says, well, do you know what? Let's make that the Lake District, or let's make that a Munro. But of course, you're surrounded people by now that say yes, and they say yes again, and off you go. So I think we all have a responsibility to perhaps encourage some of the youngsters, and I think the last 10 weeks to some respect may have done that, just to get outside and have a go and keep stepping. One of the things, interestingly, one of the things that is elite sport, ironically, is not motivating youngsters, and that's a fact. And I get some of this information because of the sponsorship stuff I'm involved with. And the reason for that is because we now have this perception that unless I'm world champion, unless I'm number one, unless I'm at the Olympics, then I'm no good. And that's what the current generation often feel. So therefore they don't try. And I just think that's a real shame. And I think back to my concept from earlier, if we could perhaps relieve a little pressure on people and encourage them, then actually what we can do is they start to find some joy in that, and the rest they will work out for themselves as they go along. Does that answer that question, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. That's very good.
It's not that difficult to do. Ronald, am I married? I have been twice. I'm now with a long-term girlfriend. Read into my lifestyle and my career whatever you want on that note. Somebody's put on here, actually, that's an interesting question. It's a private question, but I'm sure you won't mind. Tim Rogers put, what's the biggest threat to our intelligence today? What I would say is I'm obviously out of that game now, but it's probably the unknown. What I think personally, what you've got at the moment is everything is very much more accessible. So in other words, if 6 members of the 41 Club decided they wanted to do something wacky, it's actually relatively easy to achieve that relatively covertly via the internet, via mobile modern communications, encryption. You would be horrified of the sort of kit and equipment that you can buy online, like now, to get delivered to your home this week type, I mean. So I think, again, it's probably the unseen enemy would be my call on that, would be the person we can't see coming. You probably, if you've watched enough of the TV programs, you probably hear about this chatter, and occasionally you'll hear the security services get in trouble because they'll say, oh, they interviewed this guy once somewhere and we didn't pick him up. But if you have the concept of how many people appear on those chatter is phenomenal. So the sheer quantity of it via the internet is really, really difficult. And of course, there's a very thin line between invading somebody's privacy and and gathering intelligence. I mean, as an example for you, and I won't talk out of turn, some of you may have heard of Ripper 2000, and you'll occasionally see it mentioned on police dramas, and it's the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000, and that's what you have to get past, if you like, to carry out any form of surveillance, whether you're a newspaper or whether you're the security services or the police force for that matter. And back in the day, that used to say that you need written permission, effectively, RIPA permission, if you were going to conduct intrusive surveillance. So what that meant was, if you could honestly expect privacy, you were entitled to it. So in other words, if you're walking down a high street, I can follow you because you're in a public place. So you cannot reasonably expect privacy. If you're locked in your own car, on your driveway, or you're sitting in your own lounge inside your own building, you can reasonably expect privacy. It's your own place, your own space. So in other words, the threshold used to be, if you had to invade somebody's private space physically in order to be able to gather that intelligence, then you would need permission. The problem now is that electronic kit is so clever that in fact we can achieve the same thing without having to break into your car or break into somebody's house or whatever that might be. So you can see that the modern technology blurs all of those lines. And I think, for a modern government and for modern intelligence gathering services, and in fact for the media, to be completely blunt, because those lines are so blurred, that makes that really, really challenging. And I think there'll be a constant battle between society wanting to feel safe and society not wanting their kind of civil rights, civil liberty encroached upon. And I guess you've probably all of you got your own kind of take on that, your own opinion, and as you should have, frankly. Liam, you've put there, do I relax? No, I can't sit still for 2 minutes. So in fact, if you can see that picture there, so the next project is I've just signed up to race in the Paris-Dakar, or the Dakar Rally as it's now called. So the aim, I'm a novice off-road motorcyclist at the moment. So the aim in 2023, and again, all in the name of mental health and telling guys that it's okay to ask for help, is to race a 450 motorcycle in the Dakar Rally. So we cover 10,500 kilometers over 2 weeks in the Saudi Arabian empty quarter, following in the steps of T.E. Lawrence, or Lawrence of Arabia. I'm sure a few of you have probably seen that film. One of my favourite quotes, dreamers of the day are dangerous men, for they act upon their dreams. Any other sorry, so do I feel social media help or hinder? That's an interesting one to look at. It depends whether you mean professionally, socially. the way I look at these things is they are here. So therefore we have to make it work. It's as simple as that. In a business context, the ability to gather intelligence via social media is fantastic, frankly. What you'll also find now, we always used to joke, but back in the day, people involved in intelligence gathering were not allowed to have an internet profile. They're not allowed to be on social media, etc. Nowadays, it's considered so odd to have no form of internet presence whatsoever that almost you make yourself guilty by not being on it. And I always joke that the only people not on it are probably Chinese spies or my dad, frankly, and that there are usually a couple of strange people parked out the front of his house. But who knows? There we go. Jim's obviously into it. Husqvarna, Jim, actually, is the plan. So KTM, effectively, yeah.
All right, I think we've got one here which talks about the what is the most dangerous situation you found us in, and where you truly feared for your life.
If I'm really honest, and if you were to ask my dad, the one moment I thought I wasn't going to get out of was Everest. Although I've been in some really leery situations, mostly in Afghanistan, you've trained for that, you've prepared for that, as I'm sure my Royal Marines colleague will back me up. You train hard, you work with a team, you go through the drills, you get the hang of that. You do a huge amount of deployment training before you go with your own team. So you're as in control of that situation as you possibly can be. And you arguably create a sense of control over that in your own mind. And yet here we were suddenly on the side of the biggest mountain in the world in the middle of an earthquake. I mean, to give you some context, there was 7,500 people killed in Kathmandu. If I put, I don't want the video, there we go. Can you all see the town Shanxi on the bottom there? That no longer exists. So that entire town fell into a river, gone. It was just unbelievable. And we had no control whatsoever. No control whatsoever. I was a passenger. And I just remember thinking, I don't know that I can do anything about this. And my dad will tell you, he remembers seeing it on the news, and obviously my dad's had a few phone calls from me in pretty wacky places. And I phoned him, and the kind of aftershock happened whilst I was on the phone to my dad, and Dad heard it in the background. And Dad put the phone down to my mum and said, I think we need to prepare ourselves, which considering where I've been before, was the only time my dad has ever sort of said to my mum, like, this is really bad. And in fact, it's the only time I thought maybe this one's been a step too far. So, and it was because for me, this sense of having no control. Can I just, I'd really, really like to pick up on there. Somebody's just put on there, you have dealt with being isolated away from the family and friends for long periods. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling with the way things are at the moment? Guys, this is something that's really, really dear to my heart. And if you'll bear with me for a moment, I'd like to talk you through that properly, if that's okay, because I think there's probably a lot of people fighting right now. And I think a lot of people, and if I'm really honest, particularly guys, find that pretty hard to talk about. I don't mind sharing with all of you. I suffer with depression, anxiety, I have done. And one of the things I've made it kind of my work, if you like, in the last few years to do, is to find ways to deal with that and try and help with that. And I've come up with this expression, pushing back the clouds. And for me, when this sort of thing starts happening, it's often like a storm. I don't know if you've ever stood outside and you can start to see the clouds kind of building and rolling in. And often that's what can happen when we're isolated. Simple things become more traumatic. It starts to build on us. Now, the first thing you've got to do for yourself is you must set some expectation, okay? So one of the things I got my head around was when I went to Afghanistan, when I went to Everest, and when I go to Dakar, is I'm comfortable with the fact that I'm going to have some bad days, and that's okay. And sometimes we say, when we have these bad days, we feel like the weakest link. We feel like we're not coping. We feel like we're letting the side down. We feel like we should be doing more. And that's not true. You're normal. And one of the first biggest steps you can say when that starts to happen is, hey, look, this is okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to have a bad day. And that's the first thing that you've got to try and do. Then my next piece of advice, here's another little challenge we did. I'll explain this in a second. I did 2 years ago, I did a mountain stage of the Tour de France called the Étape du Tour. It nearly saw me off. But this is where I came up with this coping strategy. And what I would say to you is 2 or 3 things, right? First of all, understand your why and your direction. So whatever it is, whatever gets you out of bed or got you out of bed, remind yourself of that, right? If you possibly can. Whether that's your family, whether that's your friends, your job, it doesn't matter. But just remind yourself what that is and where your direction is. And remind yourself that all things must pass. All things must pass, right? Whatever is going on now, it will come to an end, okay? And then what you've got to do, sorry, a bit of hay fever, then what you've got to do is you've got to have this concept of intelligence, not the information. What is real and what's not real? I don't mind sharing with you. My dad phoned me up about 3-4 weeks ago before lockdown had started to ease. And he said to me, he was almost in tears. And my dad is a 75-year-old ex-rugby player. He used to play tight head prop for Neath. So he's not someone you see cry all that often. And he was pretty upset. And I said, Dad, what's up? And he said, well, I can't cope with not being able to see you or your sister until a year next September. I said, Dad, what are you talking about? He said, well, that's what we've been told. That's what we've been told. A year next September, we're not allowed to see family. And I said, Dad, whoa, stop. And some local journalist in a local paper, he lives in Dorset, had written some article in this local paper, you know, sort of pontificating about their own personal opinion about lockdown and vaccines and vulnerable people. My dad's had a quadruple heart bypass, so he's firmly in that bracket, waxing lyrical about these people. And I said, Dad, right, firstly, that's not real. Secondly, you know, until you see Boris Johnson talking about that, move on. Do you know what I mean? So deal with what's real. And then probably the next bit that's really important, I think, is I put on here, avoid the dangerous middle. Big outcomes, small steps. So in other words, what you've got to do is have a bigger picture in your head to see your family, to spend Christmas with your grandkids or whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. But do that one day or 1 hour at a time if you need to. So in other words, that cycle race that I was talking about there, if you look at that, there's 4 horrendous mountains in the middle of that. So what I did is I said to myself, I've got to get to the end. That's my big picture. But when I'm here, all I concentrated on, can anyone see my little, if I do that, can anyone see the little arrow? When I was here, all I concentrated on was getting to here. And then I concentrated on getting to here. And then I concentrated on getting to here. So one step at a time. And at one point, I was quite literally one lamppost at a time. Next lamppost, next lamppost. But in my head was the bigger picture of getting to the end. So in other words, what I didn't think about was the second hill or the third hill. Hold the big picture in your head and then give yourself small goals to achieve along the way. And if you can do that, then I promise you, sadly, there is no answer, but it does make quite a big difference. And what I would say to you as well is, you know, be kind to yourself and definitely do not be afraid to pick up the phone and just tell somebody I'm having a rubbish day. Yeah. The amount of times we do that now, my team, my friends, and it just makes an enormous difference. I hope, sorry for the long-winded answer, but it was quite dear to my heart, that, and I hope that's of value perhaps to a few people that are watching. And you're very welcome to get in touch with that. My entire company, just out of interest, I've paid for every single member of my team is a mental health first aider because I think it's that important, particularly, and that was before this happened, actually. Somebody's put on there, do I regret decisions to follow your profession? No, absolutely not at all. I've done some things, I've seen some amazing things. I wasn't a lifer. You know, I've got some friends that have done some really amazing things within the services, within the military, that stayed in and have done the whole bit. That wasn't really for me. So no regrets. Could I have made more of it? Probably. But then I wouldn't be where I am now either. So I think you just have to take it as it is, really. Yeah, that's that. I'm just trying to see if there's any other
I think there was just one about Salisbury is an example of unusual event. How often do these type of events come up, especially here in the UK?
Again, I'm a bit out of touch with. I'm a little bit out of touch with this now, but probably more than you might realise. But what happens quite a lot is kind of, I don't know what the expression is, brush-offs, conversations, meetings. My personal experience is that kind of physical action is pretty rare, to be honest. I think that is largely the thing of movies. And I suspect, and please, this is absolutely not the government's point of view, this is my own take on this, but I suspect that was probably internal politics. There's some interesting, I've worked with Russia, and there's, not in terms of security services, in terms of my own business, and there's some interesting politics around Putin and exceptionally wealthy Russians that live in the UK and stuff. And I suspect that was probably more to do with that than any British politics. But again, I caveat that with, I really don't want to see myself as, former British agent on the BBC tomorrow says Putin's done this. So I'm trusting you as club members. They can't actually sack me anymore, but they can probably make life pretty miserable.
Okay, there's one here that says, do you meditate?
So I find this really, I actually find this as a concept quite interesting. And by that, what I mean is, again, I think wellness has become hijacked a little bit. And there's a movement around meditation and around yoga and Pilates and stuff. And I think, sadly, some of that has put people off. And I'm getting there, I promise. So for me, the concept of meditation is actually a great one. Do I sit there and perhaps what you would see as meditation? No. But do I get on my bike and just go out and cycle to clear my head? Absolutely. I'm waiting a knee operation at the moment, so I can't run, but I would do the same thing. So that is a similar form of meditation. So I absolutely, and what I've taught myself to do as well, and I can't recommend it enough over the years. And I guess I'm fortunate. I mean, so Ronald, you put there, who's your boss and paymaster? I am. It's my company, thankfully. I do have 3 co-directors, but I usually win. So I'm fortunately in that position where when I'm having a bad day or it's not working, then what I do is I accept that and I move on. So I go and, if you like, meditate. Only what I'll do is I'll go for a run or I'll go for a walk. I'm in beautiful Scotland, so I'll go for a walk. And I've actually found that I become more productive because of that. Whereas if I sit and sort of stare at a screen endlessly, then I just get worse and worse and worse. And I found that actually taking some time out, looking after yourself and coming back, I found I'm more productive. So I guess it's a form of meditation, but it's whatever works for you, really.
Perfect. Well, listen, we're taking up so much of your time already. I think you've covered so many questions. I was going to hand over to Marcus, who I think's here and maybe possible that he can unmute himself. Otherwise, I'm not too sure I can find him. And then we'll try and polish off with President Peter. And you said you were going to mention a couple of other bits as well to wrap up. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah. So, guys, what we're going to do is we've set up this. This is a bit of a mission. I sort of hinted at it earlier. But one of the things we're looking to do with the whole Dakar Rally thing, and my recommendation is if you've any interest in adventure, deserts or motorbikes or just crazy people doing crazy things, really, one of the things that's quite nice about Dakar is it's a proper old-fashioned adventure. But what we're going to do is it's a 3-year journey. So right now, I'm a novice motorcyclist in terms of off-road. I obviously need to up my game a lot to get to the stage where I can race at Dakar. So we're going to go on a journey because for me, I'm going to face psychological battles. I'm going to face physical battles, skills acquisition. And I think all of that is a great vehicle for showing people, to answer somebody's question from earlier on, that you can get out and do something, you can achieve something, and you can make stuff happen. And along the way, because it's a reasonably macho occupation, what we want to do is we want to tell as many people as possible that it's okay to ask for help. So if you're having a bad day, you're a bit up and down. So either for clubs like yourselves or for corporates, one of the things we're proposing to do along the way is some talks, some get-togethers, some ride-outs, some whatever you want to do. We'll come to places to work with the big Dakar bikes and kind of talk to people and just encourage as many people. So I know I spoke to Marcus, who was telling me that quite a lot, there's a bit of a reasonable kind of adventure come motorcycling element to the club. So if the club would like to get involved, I don't mean money, that's not what I'm talking about, but then it would be great to have you guys on board and come on that journey from me from now till 23. And we keep giving you updates and coming back to you and letting you know how we're getting on and perhaps do some more stuff for the club along the way, whether that's ride outs or I have a few teammates that are quite interesting as well. We'll get them doing a bit for you as well. But just generally invite you to kind of come on that journey with us if that's something that you think your members and the guys would be interested in. I'm sure you must have a club patch or a badge that we can perhaps put on the side of a motorbike or a jacket and see if we can't take that on the Dakar Rally.
That'd be awesome. All right. So I'll try and find Marcus.
I'm here, mate. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Go on then. You say a few words, then I'll hand over to Peter, and then we'll try and wrap things up.
Okay. All right, Tim. Just really, mate. I think the thing from tonight, which has come through thick and fast, is it doesn't matter what your background. We all have challenges ahead of us, and certainly over the last 12 weeks, what's been really, really important to a lot of us within 41 Club is making sure we kept connected with each other. And you can't underestimate your words tonight and how powerful they are to a lot of the guys on here, because we are a tactile club who get together quite frequently. We get round the table and we discuss current times, and we also have a few beers. And giving your time up tonight for the guys, I cannot tell you how much it will be appreciated by all of the lads on here, because we're like you, we're in the same boat. We're having to do things differently. But one of the things that certainly Peter, the president, myself and other guys, we've been determined to keep in contact with everybody so they know when we do come out of this, there is something at the end. And this tonight typifies the reason why we've done events like tonight through people like yourself who've given up their own time. So I'm just saying a huge thank you, and a huge thank you for talking about the mental health thing, which is a big thing for me for my own reasons as well. But I think that, you know, what you've said about following your journey and sharing, the club would be delighted to, you know, the members would be delighted to come on that journey with you over the next few years. And so it's just a personal thanks for me. I know we do stuff through business, through obviously our connections, but tonight, you know, it's again just a sincere thank you for giving up your time. So on that note, I'll pass back over to Mark. Cheers, Tim.
Thank you, Marcus. No, you're very. I mean, a couple of guys have put there, perhaps not quite you were expecting, but I hope valuable for you nonetheless. I think my point is, if you can take something away, then to me that's more valuable than simply telling old war stories. Maybe we can do that another day over a beer.
Yes,
Absolutely.
that's been awesome. Okay, well I'll just hand over to Peter for a moment. Hang on a sec. Right.
Okay. Thanks very much, Tim. Just echo what Marcus has just said. It's absolutely brilliant, very inspirational. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to a lot of things you've said as our experiences during lockdown times. And it's very helpful to know all these mental things that we can use to get out of this. Also, being an Ashby lad myself, you know, we both live life to the full, but I think yours is a bit more fuller than mine.
I won't hear a word of it, Peter. I won't hear a word of it.
No, it's great, mate. Absolutely fantastic. Thanks ever such a lot. And also, whilst I'm on, I'd like to thank Marcus, my PLC chairman, who has worked tirelessly this last 12 weeks with Mark House, who is also, they've taken up their spare time, which takes up a lot of time to put these events on in the background. And they're both working full time. So I can't thank these two guys enough for putting together what they have done for us over the last 12 weeks. Thanks a lot, guys. We're going to have about 3 or 4 weeks summer break now, but we will be back in 3 or 4 weeks' time with another lot of speakers to take you through the autumn and winter, because I don't think we're going to be seeing much of us face to face in the near future, probably in small numbers, but not in big numbers. So whilst we can get together like this in big numbers, we will continue putting on some great events for you. Thanks for all attending. I know you've enjoyed it. I have. I'm sure everybody has. Thanks a lot. Thanks again, Tim, and thanks, Marcus, and thanks, Mark, again. Also, Jim for doing
I'm going to put on there, if anyone wants to get in touch on LinkedIn and wants some help with some of the stuff we talked about, then please don't be embarrassed. Absolutely, all doors always open, always.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.
That's completely awesome. Thank you so much. We'll see you in 2 or 3 weeks. Thanks so much for all joining. It'll be the recording will be on Facebook and hopefully YouTube on Friday or Saturday, where you can watch it all again and relive all these special moments and hear more about what Tim's got to say. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, everybody, and I'll see you all soon. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Many thanks.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.